Welcome and thanks for joining us as we talk about creating accessible documents. This is an important time for us to start thinking about digital accessibility, especially as we're uploading more content than ever before. So let's get started. I'll pull up an old syllabus of mine. This is a syllabus that I had written before I was aware of a lot of things about accessibility. And so I'm sure it's going to have a lot of errors. And so I'm going to let you join me as I go through it and see what needs to be fixed. I'll start with the accessibility checker. Okay, here in Microsoft Word, there's an accessibility checker. You'll find it under the Review tab. It just says check accessibility. But by the way, just a quick tip, if at any point I'm talking about something in the menu and you don't see it, remember that you can always just type things in the search bar right here. So like accessibility, and it would show you where the accessibility checker is. Many programs and apps have an accessibility checker now. Many websites have an accessibility checker. So as you're typing, just be on the lookout for that because it can be very helpful. Let's look at how the accessibility checker can help us out here. All right, so the things that the accessibility checker is going to tell you is first, it'll tell you errors, and then it might also tell you some warnings. Those are things that just might be a problem, okay? So let's take a look at the errors now. The first error here is missing alternative text. So any image that you have should have alternative text. The alternative text is what will tell anyone who's not able to see the screen that they're reading, it will tell them what is being pictured. So you can find that just by right-clicking on the image and selecting Edit Alt Text. And in this box, you could click this where it says Mark as Decorative. You could also classify it as decorative or not important content for the document by just putting a couple of quotation marks like I did right here. But I'm going to go ahead and give a very simple description. The 5 C's of language learning. And that's enough of a description to let people know what I'm looking at, what the image is. Okay? And now, going back to the accessibility checker, notice that the errors that I fix, they go away. So that's kind of great. Now, the next one is that I have a table with no header row. All tables should have a header row. Okay, so and if I click on it right here in the accessibility tab, it just takes me right to the table that doesn't have a header row. And I'll select the table, and then I'll go into table design here, and I'll just check the box that says header row so that we can make sure that my table has a header row. And look, now that error has disappeared. Another error that it has here, it says image or object not in line. And this is kind of difficult for me because I am a visual learner and I'm looking at this document, and I really like the layout. I like the way it's positioned. I like the way the words are wrapping around the image. However, I understand that this does cause problems for people using assistive devices to select things or to read the document. So I'm going to go ahead and select it here and tell it to be in line with text. Okay, which makes it in line with the text, but in order to improve that visually, now I will just make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so, but it's still there. Now, the last part here, this isn't actually an error, but it says warnings. It's to check a warning. And I'll go down and check that warning. Now, this is interesting. It says, why fix? Okay, screen readers might read the text in a layout in an unexpected order. All right, it says steps to fix. It says use the tab key to navigate through the tab cells. I know what this is about. A screen reader will read my tables one row at a time. And that way, my readers will be able to visualize what is under each heading. However, here when you have this, when you have a merged cell like this, then that creates some problems. I could create another row right here and put this text under both of these columns and this text under this column and this text under these two columns, but I know personally that it's okay to just let this row go, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and close the accessibility tab. And let's start talking about a key point when it comes to understanding the difference between designing your documents for visual learners and designing your documents for all learners, and that is navigation. Okay, first of all, notice that a visual learner or visual user would probably have no problems navigating through my syllabus. A parent looking to find what the materials are for class, a student wanting to go back and look at the grading procedures or to check the homework, they know exactly where to go. They can kind of scan and they can see it because I made those parts in bold. I made them stand out, but there's no navigation. There's no division between the sections in the document for those who are using assistive devices. And I'm not just talking about screen readers. I'm also talking about someone who has to use perhaps other devices to indicate their selections, like a mouth stick. They'll have a stick in their mouth and be able to tap on the different sections that they want to get to. And they wouldn't be able to do that if you don't have navigation built in to your document. So first of all, just to check and see if your document has some navigation, you can find that under the View tab, and if you click Navigation Pane. See, when I pull up the navigation pane, there's nothing there, all right, and that's not good. So let's start by adding our structural markup. See, right now, I don't know about you, but when I was learning how to create documents originally, I learned how to make the title bold or centered or underlined, things like that to make it look the way I wanted it to look. But what we need to start doing now is turning to styles. And we need that structural markup to be in the document. So let's see, this clearly is a title. I'm going to go ahead and label it as a title. Okay, and I don't like the size, but I'm going to talk about how to fix it later on. Take a look here and see all of the options that you have. Notice that there's heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3. I'm about to use those. Those are like you're going to start with heading 1, and then any subheadings under that would be labeled as heading 2. Any subheadings under that would be labeled as heading 3. Okay, so I'll scroll through, and this is a heading 1. Materials needed for class. Grading is also a heading 1, but then under grading, and I need to separate the lines here. Under grading, I have proficiency would be a heading 2, and the speaking grade would be a separate heading 2. Homework, heading 2. Late work policy, I think that still goes under grading, so that's another heading 2. But then we have a new heading, and that's rubrics. So that's back to heading 1. And now that we have all of the structural markup that we need in our document, let's talk again about how it looks, because visually, this is not my style. This is not what I wanted my syllabus to look like. Okay, so start by clicking on the Design tab first and look at the different formatting designs that Word already has built in and see if any of those appeal to you. Okay, I'm not particularly fond of any of these. I'm going to head on back over to the Home tab, and I'm going to format these the way I want them to look. Don't worry though, you're not going to have to go through and format each and every heading and subheading. Watch. Let's start by clicking on this heading 1, and I'm going to change it to black. I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and that is what I want my heading to look like. In fact, I could even make it centered. Maybe I wanted to center my headings. I could do that. And once I have it looking the way I want it to look, I'm going to right click on heading 1 here, and I'm going to select update heading 1 to match selection. And look, now everything that I marked as heading 1 now uses that same structural formatting. Okay, so and then I'm going to do the same thing with heading 2. So I'll take this this heading 2 and I'll make it look the way I want my heading 2 to look. And then I'll right click on heading 2 and say update heading 2 to match selection. Now all of the text that I had marked as heading 2 looks the same. But the absolute best advantage to adding all of this structural markup to your document is that now when you click on the View tab, and let's open up that navigation pane again, now you see you have all of the different sections. So any user, whether they're using assistive devices or not, any user is able to easily find what they need in your document. Now we've talked about um, using the accessibility checker. We've talked about fixing tables and images to be in line with the text and the importance of adding descriptions to that alternative text. And we've added some structural markup to improve navigation in our document. It only took a few minutes to do these things. And it was pretty easy to do. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the document and just kind of nitpick a little bit, looking for some other things that I notice that can cause problems for assistive devices. But before I start combing through my document, I do want to point out that I will have a quick tips sheet available for everyone at my blog. You'll find my blog at adventurouseducators.com. And so now back to combing through my document here. Now, well, one of the first things that I noticed right away is that I have an empty line here, and you shouldn't do that. I was probably trying to put some more space between the two paragraphs, and when you do that, you should always just go into your paragraph spacing options. So play around in the line spacing options to get an idea of what you're able to do, but use spacing options as opposed to empty lines and spaces in your document. Another thing that I notice is that I have this sentence entirely in bold. You should never bold an entire sentence. So instead, just think about what is the text that really needs to be bold, and let's de-emphasize the rest. Another thing that I notice right off the bat is that I have a URL typed into my document right here, and we don't want to do that unless the URL itself is meaningful to what you're trying to say. In this case, I just have the URL pasted, and so I'll copy the URL and I'll remove it. Now I'll look for some meaningful text, and that's where I want to have the link, is in the meaningful text, like American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. So I'll right click on that meaningful text and I'll add the URL. Now it's a meaningful text link, and that's what we want to use in our documents. But on that topic, also don't use the expression click here in your documents. And scrolling along a little bit more, another thing that I noticed is that I have all caps here, which is kind of unusual for me. I'm not even sure why I did it there, but it's pretty interesting that we actually learn to read by memorizing the shape of words, and that's why we're able to read as quickly as we do. So you kind of slow people down when you write in all caps. Try to avoid that, and I'll fix that afterwards. Now I think I've got my document pretty much the way I need it to be. And I hope that you found it useful combing through my old syllabus with me so that I can get it ready to post online, and I'll know that it's accessible to all students and their families, their supports. So have fun designing. Remember that design matters.